Hello and welcome to another edition of the program Health Guide, where we take you on a fun ride about learning and understanding and knowing more about health-related issues. We talk about treatment, infection, cures, where to seek for medical attention when you need medical health. With me, Fauziya Lukman. Today on the program, we'll be talking to a medical doctor, an associate of the World Medical Associate of the World, and a publicity secretary for the Medical Association of Nigeria. Today we'll be talking about nutrition and dietetics in Africa as a whole, because we tend to misunderstand the word nutrition and dietitian, or dieting as a lot of us in Africa call it. With me is none other than Dr. Patrick Ezie. Dr. Patrick is a medical practitioner and the owner of a very renowned medical hospital. But we'll go on a short break while I introduce you to my guest. Welcome back, and I hope you've had a wonderful time waiting and you got your pen and papers ready, because today we're going to be unveiling a lot. Like I said earlier on, we'll be talking to a medical practitioner in person of Dr. Patrick Ezie. Dr. Patrick, welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Fauziya, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be in your midst again.
Oh, thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
Now, earlier on, you said something about being an associate member.
Yes.
And a publicity secretary.
Yes.
Can you elaborate more on that, please?
All right. So I'm currently an associate member of the World Medical Association, and there are a few medical practitioners that have that distinction. To be an associate member, you have to have worked within the hierarchy of the World Medical Association, which means that you also have carried out projects and programs across countries across the globe. So I was fortunate to have done that for 2 or 3 years, and we were able to at some point start up the Junior Doctors Association of Africa. That was also one of my landmark achievements in the World Medical Association. I've also been a past publicity secretary for the Nigerian Medical Association, FCT. So that's giving me an extensive or a broad overview of what happens both internationally and, of course, locally.
Okay. Now, speaking of which, a lot of people tend to misunderstand the concept between nutrition and dieting, or dietitians, or dietetics. Can you tell us what is the relationship between both? Is it the same thing, or are there an explicit in-depth to it?
So one of the reasons why I was really excited about the topic is that more than half of Africa is malnourished in some sense. And for you to understand what malnutrition is, you have to first understand what nutrition is. So nutrition is just the way the body uses food to provide energy to sustain life. So that's just nutrition. So many things can happen in that entire process whereby a human being is not able to provide energy to sustain life. And that's where a lot of illnesses now begin. But when you talk of dieting, you're talking about a conscious effort to regulate food intake in order to achieve changes in one's physical condition or one's physiologic condition. So it's a conscious attempt. And that attempt could be personal or could be on the instruction of your medical doctor or your nutritionist because of maybe a cause of certain illnesses that you might have that may require you to, diet. So they are both interrelated, but also very different. So when we talk of nutrition in broad sense, what we're looking at is how much of the population of Africa, for instance, is eating the right foods. When they eat the right foods, does the body metabolize it? And if the body metabolizes it, is it available to give those people of that population a sense of well-being that enables them to carry on their daily activities without breaking down, without falling ill, without the need for hospital admissions and all that? Because if one is nutritionally balanced, the tendency that you will have frequent hospital visits decreases exponentially. Okay. So that's really the key difference between dieting and nutrition.
Okay, so in Africa specifically, there is this myth about nutrition being attached to just babies and infants or little children, while dieting is attached to the adults. Now, what is the benefits of eating healthy and eating a nutritious meal between the both? Because does that mean nutrition can apply to adults?
Yeah, so I think that nutrition in its own sense is a broad, it's a relative term that human beings across board have to be part of, but while we are more focused on children is that with children, nutrition is a very key element to their growth and development. So if the infants and the babies and the toddlers and the young adults are not getting specific dietary requirements, you're going to have children with stunted growth, impaired cognitive function. You're going to have children with delayed milestones and all that. So there's a lot of consequence that happens when children or adolescents or babies don't get that daily requirement. But for adults, because they have spent a lifetime building themselves, they have gotten the caloric levels, they've achieved peak development. At that point, we no more emphasize nutrition. What you start hearing more is dieting, because they're now trying to lose all they have gained, maybe for certain reasons, for maybe obesity or maybe disease conditions. And then you now start hearing more of dieting, because you now want them to live healthier lives, because they have, over the years, accumulated excess nutrition, in quotes, that is now giving them disease conditions.
So when we talk about healthy lifestyle or dieting or just eating healthy in general concerning adults, now does that mean only it's centered only on people that are obese or just on the extra chunk side, or naturally for health benefit one can do it? Because most times in Africa here, the moment we hear the word dieting, we always associate it to people that are fat. Now when they see people that are slim and eating healthy, dieting and eating healthy, they tend to criticize them and tell them they are doing a certain thing out of the norms of the society. Now, is there a way that people can get to understand that there's difference between eating healthy as an adult and dieting? Are they the same thing, or it's just something that is just you pick because you're just on the added weight side?
So usually for most adults, dieting becomes a personal decision. So no matter how much your doctor advises you or your nutritionist advises you or your neighbors complain, there isn't much you can do about an individual's perceived appearance, except the individual wants to take on that task of dieting. So Because of that, it's more of like a personal diagnosis. The patient or the individual decides that, okay, I think my weight is a problem, and then starts seeking for ways of reducing said weight, or if it's causing the individual particular medical issues, then the person comes to hospital. So, but all this is just to tell you how it starts. So, but when the individual gets to the hospital, the things we start checking are things like the BMI. So the BMI is the world standard for whether an individual is obese or not obese. So for instance, I could feel I'm not obese, and then if you subject me to a BMI, I'm obese, and then there's nothing I can do about it. So if you are in a facility where your BMI is calculated, because what the BMI does is that it's the basal metabolic index, so it calculates whether you are obese for your height. Or your weight. So it calculates all that, and then gives you a value that puts you in a spectrum. So you now know whether you are moderately obese, mildly obese, or whether you're within the normal weight bracket. So if you are mildly obese, then there are certain things that have to commence. And then we start advising weight reduction and weight reduction plans. This is where the nutritionists and the dietitians now come in. So we could give you a plan and then put a dietitian on you, because we want you to, we find out that being overweight is a problem, we want you to still maintain a healthy diet, but not avoid feeding to the point that it causes other problems. So like people developing ulcers and people developing bulimia, for instance, these are adverse effects of excessive dieting, you know. So also the other thing that can happen is an individual can, as a result of maybe overweight, he starts developing other things like frequent urination, like excessive hunger, and then he comes to the hospital and he would diagnose him to be diabetic, you know. So obesity can push you into diabetes. And so if you're diabetic, then definitely you're going to need nutritional rehabilitation. We're going to need to tell you, okay, you can't eat this, you have to eat that, eat this, avoid this, and all that. So these are the things that can happen, you know, with perceived dieting, you know.
So like, okay,
Yeah.
when it comes to nutrition, so then how many stages of nutrition do we have? Or we just go straight to the nutrition deficiency?
Yeah, so usually when we talk about nutrition, there are 7 stages of it. So in those stages we are, and this constitutes actually all the different classes of nutrients that you can get, you know. So we talk about carbohydrates, the proteins, we talk about fats and oil, we talk about water, the various classes of feeds and all that, you know, and their compositions are now become very important to everyone. So, for instance, in Africa, while you have a varying spectrum of malnutrition across the entire continent, is that certain groups favor certain meals over certain others. So, for instance, in the southeastern part of Nigeria or in the northern part, you have heavy carbohydrate diets. So people are more in the fufu, gari, pounded yam, and then you see individuals who will do morning, afternoon, night, same kind of diet. You know, so fufu in the morning, gari in the afternoon, in the night maybe rice.
Which brings me to the next question.
Yeah, so
in Africa, I think there's a misconception.
yeah.
What do you think is the difference between eating food and nutrition?
Yeah. So when you eat too much of one class of food, it's gonna potentiate problems, you know. So you could, especially in children. So for children who eat like heavy carbohydrate foods, the tendency of them becoming diabetic in future increases. They could develop things like marasmus. So they have a lot of energy, but because protein is lacking in their diet, they look unhealthy.
Yeah.
Then you could have kwashiorkor, because you've heard of the popular kwashiorkor, where you have extreme deficiency of protein, you know, and that causes a lot of wasting, because protein is responsible for developing skin tissues, muscles, and all that. So if it's not present, the child doesn't get all those appropriate developments. And at the end of the day, you have children that are either stunted or children that have impaired cognitive ability. They can't cope in class and all that. And then these days, there's a rising trend of what we call sugar baby syndrome, where you have babies who are big, obese. You see a 5-year-old is looking like a 10-year-old or even a 12-year-old. And it's because of excessive intakes of sugars, unrefined carbohydrates, So there's more that taking more of a particular class of food, So you have all that happening. And then for adults too, of course, you have a lot of refined food these days. People are not eating natural foods anymore.
It's almost as if Africa now are almost leaning towards processed foods.
Yeah, so
maybe
we're leaning
it's
more.
the one in vogue. You just want to eat in trend and all of that.
Yeah, so
because I had a friend who always complains that she's eating food, she's eating the right amount of food, she's eating healthy, but then she's having this severe chest pain, and then whenever she walks or does anything strenuous, she breathes heavily, and she's way slimmer than me. But then when she went to see the doctor, she was told she was fat and she need to watch on her weight. She's like, she's just eating the normal regular African food, and I'm like, okay, there has to be a difference between eating the normal African food, because I feel there are other things you can do with the African foods, African system, and still be on the right side medically.
Yeah. So for your friend, there could be other things going on, like for instance, and that's why nutrition is a very technical area. So sometimes some people have what we call metabolic syndromes. So for instance, what the doctor may be actually correctly trying to say is that her body's ability to metabolize fat might be impaired. So some people have that as a problem. It's just like the way some people develop diabetes. So if they eat that class of food, it doesn't get metabolized properly. And then they could now develop cholesterol problems, and then that can cause a lot of blockages, chest tightness and all that. So you see somebody who is very slim, and then you do a fasting lipid profile, which is a test to check the level of fat in the bloodstream, and it's very high. So, and we've seen people who have had stroke from things like that, and they're like, but I'm not on the fat side. And then you bring somebody who looks obese, and then you check the blood level for fat, and it's within the normal range. So that's why sometimes we always advocate for checkups, because sometimes these issues, yes, they are nutritionally related, but sometimes genetics also plays a role. So if you have the genetic predisposition to have what we call hypercholesteremia, which means that your body isn't metabolizing fat properly, then you might now start having fat-related problems, even if you're not on the obese size. So that's another thing that can happen. That is not obviously because she's eating fatty foods and all that.
Okay. So now you can still be eating fatty food and have proper nutrition, or you can just stay away from fatty food if you want to have a proper nutrition, that you don't need a dietitian, or you still need a dietitian even when you're eating the properly fat nutrition food.
Yeah, so what we advise is a balanced diet. So in a balanced diet, everything's there. So we're not saying don't eat your fufu, or don't eat your swallows, or don't take your tools and all that. But if you're going to do that, make sure there's fish, there's protein in the meal. Make sure there's egg, if you like. Make sure that you have carrots, vegetables, then make sure that, at least you drink enough water, and then the soup is healthy, with all the things that needs to be there. So by the time you look at a meal and it has all the classes of foods in it, the tendency that one will be out of proportion to the other would not be tenable. So, but people don't make that conscious effort, and that's where the problems now start. So if you're going to introduce fat into your food, it's fine, because the oils you use to make the food anyway are on that class of food. So that keeps it in balance to some extent. But when you have a situation whereby people are doing like maybe rice, or it's akpu or tuwo all the time, you know, and then maybe the soup is not well processed, or it's just anything doesn't contain enough vegetables, so there's no protein in it, especially with the current hardships across Africa. You know, protein is becoming more and more expensive. So it's the long-term challenge is that you now have a more unhealthy population, because they can't afford to eat the kind of things they want to eat. And then you also know that in a lot of parts of Africa, there's war or conflict and insecurity going on, which also restricts access of food to individuals and to key populations. So all these things now constitute an African continent with severely malnourished people, you know, and that's another issue altogether.
Well, a little reminder, you're watching us on Global TV, channel 276 on Star Times, and we have been talking to Dr. Patrick Ezie. We've been talking about nutrition and dietetics in Africa. We'll go on a little short break, and when we're back, we'll talk about the effect of dieting on adults, especially when it comes to medical. I'll see you after the break. Welcome back, and I hope you've been enjoying the program so far and have been learning a lot from me, Fauziya Lukman, on Health Guide. Now, before the break, we were talking about nutrition and dietitian and dieting and dietetics, all of it in a whole on African food policy. And we're going to talk about the most important part of it all that I feel is a lot of being like underestimated in Africa, which is ulcer. Doctor, how do you think ulcer comes in with dieting and nutrition, especially dieting on adults?
Yeah, so there's no week in the hospitals where we don't see a lot of patients who have ulcer, and it's becoming a rather growing, in quote, epidemic, because the numbers are astonishing. But there are two things that drive this current rise in ulcer burden for countries. One is that you have individuals who are working long hours and forgetting to eat. Yeah, as essential as that is, forgetting to eat can be a problem. So I will try and explain why. The way the human physiology is created, the stomach specifically is created uniquely. It's able to produce acid that helps in digestion. And the stomach acid is almost as concentrated as battery acid. So you have acid in the stomach walls, and when you eat protein, that's what helps to digest most of that. So if, for instance, an individual takes dinner at 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. and then by 7 a.m. the following morning hasn't eaten, that's 12 hours. If by noon that same individual hasn't eaten, that's another 5 hours. So we're talking of about 18 hours without food. And sometimes people will not eat until lunchtime, which is around 2, 3. So you've added close to 22 hours without eating. And the reason why people don't feel that gap is because they were sleeping for 12 hours. You were sleeping for 12 hours, but your stomach was not sleeping.
Yeah, the system was basically
the system was still
faster.
acting. Yeah, so then when you don't eat for that long, the acid in that stomach begins to digest the stomach walls and create holes and openings that can bleed from time to time. And essentially that's why morning food is called breakfast, because your body fasts all through the night and then you're breaking that fast. You know, so a lot of people didn't know that, but that's why you have that term, breakfast. You fasted for 12 hours and you need to eat something.
So in essence, like breakfast is the most important meal of the
Yes.
day, and then dieting or like proper dieting is a way to eradicate ulcer, or ulcer can be tackled from proper dieting.
So breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Now, if you must diet, there has to be specific. You have to take a lot of things into consideration. One is, if you have an ulcer, you don't have any business dieting. That's just the truth, because you are not even getting enough in the first place. That's why you have those injuries in your abdomen, in your
Okay, so
stomach.
there's difference between dieting and eating healthy.
Yes.
Okay, so when you eat healthy, you wouldn't need like a dietitian to place you on a diet deficit.
Yes. So if you're eating healthy and you do not have an ulcer, and you're still above the weight bracket, then dietitians can come and help you space your diet to further help you achieve the ideal weights that you're looking for. But also, when you develop ulcer, the other things you need to be careful about is that sometimes with these ulcers, you have certain bacteria that could be in the
Well,
food.
as much as
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about this a whole lot with you, because
Yeah.
I feel we have a lot more to talk about and enlighten people about it.
Yeah.
I hope you will be available for us when we call you next time to shed more light, because I like this whole in-depth about ulcer, and I would want to like really go into it and let people know a lot of things. I feel that ulcer should be a topic for another day.
Well,
explicitly.
That's okay. I'm
Well, I
always
hope when we
available.
call you, you'll be there for us.
Yeah, so I'm always available. Want to answer your call. Thank you
Well,
very much.
thank you very much for watching. You've been watching us on Global TV, channel 276 on StarTime, and you're watching the program Health Global with me, Fauzia Lukman. I hope you had a wonderful time and learned a lot. And I'm promising, if you like the program and you would want to learn more about ulcer, please do drop us a comment, and you can follow us on our social media handles on Global Television NG. See you next time. Bye.